Good evening. We're so glad you're here. My name is Marlene Trump, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's forum. This forum is sponsored by Arizona State University and the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. By way of information, ASU is a nonpartisan organization. That is, they never support or oppose any candidate or political party. For this reason, the Clean Election Commission has chosen ASU to conduct its candidate forums in Legislative District 20. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform measure which was passed by Arizona voters in 1998. Participation as a clean elections candidate is strictly voluntary. The system provides full public funding for qualified candidates who illustrate the support of their constituents by gathering $5 qualifying contributions from registered voters in their legislative district. They must also adhere to contribution and spending limits and may not accept money from special interest groups, and they agree to participate in these forums. This election cycle, the Citizens Clean Elections Commission has also invited traditional campaigning candidates to participate. If you hold your cards up, one of our volunteers will pick it up and deliver it to me. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications or speeches or personal attacks on the candidates. If you need another card, just hold up your hand. There is an independent timer who will see that all the candidates have equal time for answers to their questions and will tell them when their time is up. We expect all audience members to give candidates a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said. This means no applause, outbursts, or cheers. Our format this evening will be opening statements, 3 minutes, 2 minutes to answer audience questions, 3 minutes each for closing statements. The candidates this evening running for the House of Representatives are Mr. Thirain Ang Kim, Republican, Mr. Paul Boyer, Republican, Mr. Anthony Kern, Republican and Clean Elections candidate, Mr. Carl Seal, Republican and Clean Elections candidate. The order in which candidates will speak is determined alphabetically by last name and will progress from that starting point. The closing will be in reverse order. Mr. Thirain Ang Kim, will you please start with opening remarks?
Yes. I was born here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've lived here all my life, 49 years. And I've been a lifelong Republican. My father immigrated here from Burma. That's where I get my odd name for an American name. It's a common name in Burma, but odd here. Coincidentally, I'm half Irish and half Burmese, so half Asian and half white, if you will. But even though I've been a lifelong Republican, I didn't understand what being a Republican really meant until about 4 years ago, and I became a precinct committeeman and then a state committeeman here in well, originally it was LD6 and now LD20. And I worked on the Ron Paul campaign, supported Ron Paul. And my views, perhaps from getting a little older and from studying the founders and the Constitution, I've just continued to move more to the right. So I'm very much what I guess you might call a right-winger. And I'd like to see our party, as a Republican Party, move that direction. And I'm part of what's called the Liberty Caucus in the Republican Party. And we seek to move the party and our country more towards the values of liberty and the vision of liberty that we believe that the founders have given us through constant study of what they did, what they said, and the Constitution itself, and even the Declaration of Independence. And so that's why I'm running for state representative in LD20. It's an idealistic run for me, as much as it is to win, because to me, to continue to spread the message of liberty and of people reading the Constitution can never be, what would be the right way of putting it? I don't think it's something that we could ever do too much of. And in running for state representative, it's been a great opportunity for me in reaching out that much more to the community and to my precinct and district to get this message out. The three fundamental things that I'd like to do as a state representative is, number one, to assert our state's rights under the 10th Amendment, to stand firmly against the federal government in any areas where they're unconstitutional. They're operating unconstitutional, I feel, with the NDAA, the Patriot Act, and there's others. Also, I'd like to see small businesses get a better break, get more opportunity through less taxation, regulation, and laws. And finally, I'd like to see the Medicaid expansion, which is part of the Obamacare, repealed. And so those are the main goals that I have as a winner of the state representatives, as one of the two state representatives. And I'm also firmly against the Common Core as a requirement. So those are the areas that I'm running on. Thank you.
Thank you, Thurena Unkin. Mr. Paul Boyer.
Well, good evening, and thank you. It's an honor to be here. As your current state representative in Legislative District 20, I grew up here. I went to Mirage Elementary, I went to Desert Sky Middle School, I went to Deer Valley High School. I also earned both of my degrees here at ASU at the West Campus. I earned my bachelor's in English, where I also graduated from the Barrett Honors College and wrote and defended my undergraduate thesis. I also earned my master's degree here in communication studies. I was the editor-in-chief of the student newspaper here at ASU West. I also actually gave a lecture, actually a few lectures in this very room that you're sitting in here today. After my time for my undergrad, I went on to work as a staffer on a winning presidential campaign. I worked for AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. I did communications for them in Washington, D.C. After that, I was the legislative liaison for the Arizona Department of Corrections for 3 years. And then after that, I was the House Majority Staffer. I was an official spokesman for House Majority Staff for the Republicans. The House Speaker, then Kirk Adams, hired me to speak and to work with the media, which I did, and I was also a policy advisor on the Technology and Infrastructure Committee. It was during that time that we actually cut state spending, not just temporary, but ongoing permanent spending by $2.1 billion. We cut a fifth of our overall state spending. If only the federal government could follow our lead. Now, I'm a professor at the University of Phoenix, and I believe I'm also the only sitting K through 12 teacher in the state legislature. I was recently hired at Veritas Preparatory Academy. I teach 10th grade, Humane Letters, and I'll start there August 11th. I've also been recognized by the National Federation of Independent Businesses as the Guardian of Small Business. Also, I was awarded the Hero of the Taxpayer Award from Americans for Prosperity and a Friend of the Family. And so tonight, as you look at where we stand on the policy issues, I also hope that you consider our education and our experience, and you get 2 votes. I'm running on a conservative ticket with Anthony Kern, who's sitting next to me, and we hope to explain where we stand on the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Boyer. Mr. Anthony Kern.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I first want to recognize my wife, Jenny. She's sitting in the front row, the beautiful lady with the camera in her hand. She's been a great help to me in this campaign. I'm Anthony Kern, and I am a conservative Republican, and I've lived in the West Valley for over 30 years. Raised my children here in the Washington School District. I'm proud to run with Paul as a team member, as a teammate in this campaign, and if you like the job that Paul's been doing, I hope to earn your other vote. My platform is simple: make Arizona economically stronger, make Arizona's families stronger, make real progress in our state's education system, and work to bring back our liberties that excessive government keeps chipping away at. We have a constitution for a reason, and a lot of elected officials take an oath to uphold that constitution, but then they turn around and do what they want to do, and they ignore our Constitution, our state and federal constitutions. I'm pro-life, I'm pro-Second Amendment, I'm pro-states' rights, pro-school choice, pro-growth. I want our borders secure. I think right now that's probably one of Arizona's biggest threats. And I oppose amnesty. There's some candidates in the race that campaign as conservatives, but yet they are for higher taxes and more spending, and they're even for the Obamacare expansion, AKA the Medicaid expansion, and Common Core. As your elected official, I will work hard to repeal Obamacare. I oppose Common Core, and I oppose any federal takeover of our education system. I oppose any federal takeover of our states' rights. Our federal government has gone awry, and they're out of control. I believe in standards for our children, but I believe those standards need to be written by Arizona educators and Arizona parents, not Washington, D.C. I am a conservative Republican, and I will keep my promise. My principles are deep. I come from a family of 14 brothers and sisters, same mom and dad, Christian conservative. And we have some very deeply held beliefs. We love our country. I love my state. And I love our Constitution. So I will work hard for you. I will keep my promises.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
And I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony Kern. Mr. Carl Seal.
Hi, my name is State Representative Carl Seal, and I take that title in a very humble way. I've been fortunate enough to get to serve you for over 4 years now. In the process of doing so, I found over $500 million of your dollars being fraudulently stolen by even groups like Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. I want to stop that. I've run bills, I've run budget items to do that, and even members of my own party have pulled procedural tricks to prevent me from even putting it on the House floor. I have consistently stood for not only the Republican platform, but the concepts as articulated in the platform, like the sanctity of life. I vehemently opposed Obamacare from its inception. I stood up regularly and repeatedly on the House floor. I obtained an opinion from Alliance Defending Freedom that demonstrated that the expansion of Obamacare, the plan that the governor was presenting, would in no uncertain terms fund abortion on demand and euthanasia. I took the political heat. I took the hits, and I'm happy to do that because I did what's right from the beginning to the end, and I will always do that. I'm not one of those politicians that says one thing and does something else. I'm not a politician that everybody likes. Lincoln put it best, you can please some of the people all the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. But the people I'm concerned about pleasing is the man I face in the mirror every morning, my children and my lovely wife, Jamie. I have 3 wonderful boys and my lovely wife, Jamie. We've been married over 18 years now. I grew up not only here, but I went to grade school here in Phoenix, but I went to high school and college in Southern California. It's a wonderful place. I'm glad that I was able to escape from California. I came back here after 9/11 because my aunt had visited here and we had let her use our timeshare, and we realized that this is a wonderful place to be. And I was happy to come back here and realize that not only is it the land of Goldwater, but it's a land of people who really value the values of our country. And I'm pleased to have gotten the support of people like, I'm endorsed by Russell Pierce, the author of Senate Bill 1070 that I co-sponsored. Sheriff Joe Arpaio has been a longtime supporter of mine because I've worked vehemently to defend the border. I've been a Minuteman, I've been on the border. I've actually helped reduce the illegals coming into our country. I very much appreciate your support. I'm going to defend the Constitution. I'm going to undo Obamacare, work to undo Common Core, prevent Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah from stealing your tax dollars, and recover and defend the border. I'm a hero of the taxpayer. I've received a great many awards too, a friend of the family, and an NFIB award, which I'll receive tomorrow. I've recently been named a champion of the taxpayer. I urge you to look at their scoring there. Once again, my name is State Representative Carl Seal. I look forward to hearing your questions, and I look forward to your support.
Thank you, Mr. Carl Seal. Thank you to all the candidates. We'll now begin with the questions. The first question. In 2009, a 10% reduction of appropriations to the Division of Developmental Disabilities was passed. In 2010, an additional 5% reduction in appropriations was approved by the legislature. Will you look at benchmark recommendations regarding restoring this funding? Mr. Thrainonkin.
So these are reductions for state support from the general budget?
Appropriations to the Division of Developmental Disabilities.
Developmental disabilities, okay. The challenge that we face right now as a state, that we're seeing with the state budget, the problem with small businesses, we've seen decimation of the small businesses in the past 5, 6, 7 years, is surely a part of why the legislature has been looking at this and reducing, trying to find cuts. I think it's something that has to be looked at and analyzed, because we can't be dispassionate about people with developmental disabilities. I don't think that I would favor increasing the spending. It wouldn't perhaps be necessary to decrease it further at this point, and what I do think we could do is look at the overall budget and find ways that we could eliminate waste and find ways to utilize funds from other areas where there may be some excessive spending, and to use it in this area if there's going to be a need for increase. But I certainly wouldn't favor increased spending in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Thrainonkin. Mr. Paul Boyer.
Yeah, this is a very vulnerable population, and I have looked at ways where we can increase funding. And for this particular population, I think we need to get our fiscal house in order, number one. I also think we need to grow our economy so we can fund vulnerable populations like this population. I also think we need to fix Proposition 105. Since you're watching and you're here, you probably are aware, but for those of you who aren't aware, Arizona can only manage a third of our budget, actually 31%. That's according to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. And that number is going down every day as I speak. And so I think what we need to do is take something back to you, the voters, and to say, given our current fiscal need, given our priorities, because our priorities change over the years, do you want to continue funding every single program that previous voters, typically with low turnout votes, have decided to fund? If we can do that, if we can get a hold of our budget, then we'll be able to fund populations like the developmental disability community, which I personally think is very important to fund.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Boyer. Mr. Anthony Kern.
It's a great question. Thank you. Honored to answer it. I agree with Representative Boyer in that as the state economy grows, so should the funding for especially people and children with disabilities. When I go out there and I knock on doors and I talk to people, I meet real people with real problems, big issues. And my heart tells me I want to do all I can to help that person. I'm opposed to any tax increases unless approved by the voters. But as we bring in business into Arizona, as we stay competitive in our tax rates and remove regulation from business, I believe Arizona is already and can be a major competitor in private business. And as we bring in the businesses create wealth, which creates jobs. People move into the state, people buy food, buy gas, buy housing, and our general funds increase. So, like Paul was saying, every year, I'm sure the priorities down at the state capitol change. And as Arizona's economy grows, improves, I think we should look at maybe restoring these, put it to the voters and let them decide.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony Kern. Mr. Carl Seal.
The first year I got to serve was 2009. January of 2009 was a tailspin for the state. We were facing down a $3 billion structural deficit. What does that mean? We were spending $3 billion more than we had in income. Those of us in the legislature at that time, and I consider myself fortunate to be one of them, had to make some very difficult decisions. We made some very good decisions, and now I'm happy to report to you that the state of Arizona has well over a $600 million surplus. How did we get there? We did a balanced reduction in state government, and we reduced taxes and regulation to create jobs. In fact, Forbes magazine is recognizing Arizona as one of the greatest job creators in the nation. Why? Because we implemented a great set of Republican ideals. Tax cuts, less government, get out of the way of the job creators. We did that, it proved its way, and it will continue to prove its way, and I hope you'll give me the chance to do that as well. Serving on a committee that I serve on, Human Services, and other committees, Banking and Insurance previously, I had a lot of testimony, a lot of discussion with the people in the developmentally disabled community, and discovered that there were several things that we did administratively to make that agency work better, and I had several meetings with Director Carter over that very subject. So they took their diminished resources, even though they did suffer a reduction in resources. In fact, there were agencies that received a greater reduction than developmentally disabled, by the way. But they did much better with the resources they had, and Governor Brewer took on Director Carter, who has done an excellent job to help with those things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. The next question will begin with Mr. Boyer. The next question: what do you think are the top 3 issues facing our state right now? Mr. Paul Boyer.
Top 3 issues facing Arizona, I mentioned one of them is Proposition 105. And that really, I think, is a generational issue that if we don't get a handle of right now, or at least very soon, that we will face structural ongoing deficits if we don't fix that issue. I think education reform is probably number 2 on my book. I think that there's been a myopic focus on the standards. The business community, the education community, they focused on what's commonly referred to as the Common Core standards. I think what we should be focusing on are hiring and retaining high-quality teachers. Now, this isn't to disparage current teachers, but it's only to say that the literature suggests that the 2 top predictors of student success, K-12, and of course in life, is parental involvement and having a great teacher, in which Arizona does have a direct role as far as hiring and retaining. I think professional development, helping teachers where they are, the needs that they have and their interests, and helping them to become even better teachers than they currently are, I think that we have a direct role when it comes to that. And I also think that really just small business, regulations and taxation. We have done a very good job as far as our regulatory structure and also our taxation structure. We can get better. And the reason why I mentioned small business is because any way you look at the numbers, over 90% of all Arizona businesses are small businesses. And so we need to protect them, and we need to get more corporations, more businesses in Arizona so we can grow our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Anthony Kern.
Number 1 issue that faces, in my opinion, that's facing Arizona is our borders, especially our southern border. As you read in the newspaper and see on TV every day, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people are crossing our borders on the southern part of the United States. We have a problem that is not being addressed, and we have to do what we have to do as a state to stand up to the federal government and say enough is enough. People are welcome in our country, but they need to do it legally. And I think that the federal government is not doing their job, so our state needs to stand up and do what the federal government is not doing. Second issue is education and Common Core. I would work to repeal Common Core and give more power back to the parents, back to local control, back to Arizona. Far too many times we allow the federal government to come in and dangle the financial carrot, the money before the state, and we just run after that money. We need to remove Common Core and bring back our education system to local control, to the parents. And the third thing is the amnesty issue. I am opposed to amnesty. I think it was a Ninth Circuit Court just made the decision for Arizona that Arizona must provide driver's license to illegal immigrants. And that is a state constitution issue, which our constitution says we are not allowed to do that. Our governor's not allowed to do that. So we need to stand up to the federal government. And I'm a firm believer in states' rights, and we need to say enough is enough. We are going to protect our state, and we are going to do what it takes to push back the federal government.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony Kern. Mr. Carl Seal.
The overreach of the federal government is extremely dangerous, not only to the liberty that we enjoy in this room, but to every Arizona citizen and that of this nation. Obamacare presents the greatest threat to not only liberty, but the sheer happiness and fulfillment for every citizen in this country. Obamacare will bankrupt us. Every actuary that looks at it sees that it will, within 3 to 5 years, bankrupt this state and every state in the union. It's socialized medicine. It doesn't work. It rations health care. It funds abortions on demand and euthanasia. It's a moral travesty. Unfortunately, the governor sided with the Democrats and a few wayward Republicans and threw it down our throat and suspended most of the rules so that ideas of liberty could not even be discussed on the floor. The author of the bill, Frank Pratt, wouldn't even yield to one question, not one question. We've got to stop Obamacare. We absolutely must undo it. The next governor can do it by not levying the assessment. The legislature can immediately run legislation, and I will offer it, as I have in the past, to undo it. We absolutely must defend the border and create tax cuts. I ran an amendment in the last budget process to hold just Common Core accountable, just to have us approve the assessment before it became the assessment, like we did with Ames. I got the amendment passed with the Democrats' support. The governor called down to the House, suspended our operations, and threatened to veto the entire budget because there would have just been accountability for Common Core. What did I do? I stood my ground and demanded that it be in there. The governor patently refused and threatened to veto the budget and told me in no uncertain terms she would and blame it all on me. I didn't want my Republican colleagues to look bad. So I said, okay, if you're gonna remove my amendment, go ahead. I'm not gonna object to it. But I want you to know that I'm willing to stand the ground and stand alone if I have to.
Thank you, Mr.
And I have and I will. And I thank you for your support.
Mr. Thurane Onken.
The top 3 issues I believe we're facing at this time in our state involve really at the tip of considering all the issues is what is the role of government? What should government really be about? And I think that we've seen at the federal and state level, in many ways, lots of increase in, and there have been there has been some successes in some decreasing as well. But I think we can never stop this. We have to be vigilant in pursuing the state's right to continue to have a reductionist, to reduce government and to reduce taxation. I know we can't eliminate all taxation, but I really believe that the first step is looking at the protection of liberty, and to me that's the fundamental and primary role of government, and that's what it always should be, is to protect individual rights and civil liberties. And now more than ever, because we've seen NSA spying and bills that have been introduced at the state legislature and then vetoed by our governor. So I really feel that our state's right to stand firmly against the federal government where it has overreached the Constitution and the boundaries that it's supposed to be placed under has to be addressed. And so this is very important to me. And it stands at the number one, it's the number one thing. Our individual rights, our civil liberties, First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, the constitutional responsibility that we have has to be looked at first and foremost. Secondly, small businesses have to be able to expand and grow with further decreases in taxes and limitations on their ability to establish and grow. And then third, I think we need to absolutely repeal the Medicaid expansion that went into place, which has ushered in Obamacare. It's a part of the Obamacare law, and we need to find a better solution to health care in Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Onken. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Kern. What are your ideas on the USA borders and securing them, especially with the influx of children and adults being flown and bused to our borders?
Well, I think it's a travesty, number one. I don't know what kind of parent would ever allow their kids, I heard as young as 4 years old, cross our border. I don't understand that. What needs some ideas? We did have the National Guard, I think would be a good start down at our border. I think it's appropriate to say we should build the fence. I've seen some parts of the southern border in Arizona in the Yuma sector, and I've seen the fence, and it's a pretty solid wall that needs to be extended all the way across our state. What can we do about the children coming across? My opinion is we need to send them back humanely. We need to do what we can to not put the burden on the Arizona taxpayer, but bring those children back to their countries and let their countries deal with the situation. I do believe we need to streamline our process to become a United States citizen. I do know that it takes 15, maybe 20 years to become a U.S. citizen, and I am honored to be a United States citizen, and I'm honored, having traveled overseas many, many times, that many people in this world greatly respect this nation and greatly admire us, and they want to become a citizen. They want to do what they can, but they don't have the means to become a U.S. citizen because it takes so long and it costs so much money. Streamline the process. I am a supporter of 1070, and I really believe that we should not put on the backs of the taxpayers of Arizona, but do what we can to make the illegal immigrants go back to their countries and do the process the right way.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Mr. Carl Seal.
As I said before, I'm a Minuteman. I've been on the border. I've actually stood watch and helped reduce the illegals crossing our border and the drug traffickers and reported them, and the local law enforcement intercepted them. I'm really proud that I've done that, and through doing that, I've had a lot of interaction with border sheriffs like former sheriff that passed away in Cochise County, and our current Sheriff Daniels of Cochise County. And I've conducted many tours of my colleagues to show them the border, that the people that live there are in abject fear of the southbounders, people coming north with their drug trafficking, then they come south and break into their house and steal from them. People in that part of the state don't leave their house alone unattended. Why? Because they know what will happen. It's terrible what's happening there. If you really want to know what's going on, go there. Visit there. You'll find out that that's the case. What's the solution, though? I've worked hard on the solution. The solution is actually pretty darn simple. We create an interoperability system that won't cost us more than $8 million so that local law enforcement knows technologically what's crossing the border. And if the Border Patrol won't do its job and stop the illegals coming into our country and the drug traffickers and the human traffickers that do untold things to women, if they won't stop them, I assure you the sheriffs will, because they're locally elected and they're very accountable. They can and they will if they just know when it's crossing. I've worked on interoperability. There was even a grant available after the Krentz murder to fund that. Unfortunately, the Obama administration refused to let us make an application for it, even though there was over $8 million sitting there unused that could have been used by Arizona. The Obama administration wouldn't let us even make an application to use it after the Krentz murder. I worked hard to make that application happen, and at the final moment, the Obama administration shut us down and said, no way. I take the punches and I fight the good fight, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to continue to do that.
Mr. Thurainan-Kin.
This is an interesting conversation to have because, first of all, my father immigrated here from Burma, which is now called Myanmar, but it's the same country, Southeast Asia. It's a horrible country. You would never want to grow up there. In addition to being terrible environment because it's always raining half of the time and it's always hot and humid the rest of the time with about 90% humidity. It's just a very poor country. They live under constant tyranny compared to what we have here. I would say it's almost 100% tyranny. It's slowly improving of late, but for decades it's been under a horrible regime, a militaristic regime. It'd be like living under Adolf Hitler always. as the oppressed group. And he immigrated here in 1956 to Arizona because he had a personal sponsor. He had to raise money, and he had to pass tests and learn our Constitution to get over here. He has 14 brothers and sisters. About 8 of them have come over, my aunts and uncles. They all live in Mesa and grew up here. So you can see clearly that it's just a matter of enforcement. And the enforcement, interestingly enough, it lies at the federal level. It's in the Constitution that the federal government is supposed to protect the border and enforce it. That's one of the powers that they're given, that we want them to have that free power. Not, of course, to keep us in, but to not allow people unless they follow certain rules, which my father and my aunts and uncles all had to follow to be able to get in here. However, since we're not seeing the kind of support that we're needing, we see what happened with SB 1070, and I know a lot of people didn't like it, but you have to do something if the federal government isn't performing its responsibility in obeying the Constitution. I am also opposed to amnesty, and I would have to agree with what Anthony Kern put forth as a humane way to help the people go back to where they came from until
Thank you, Mr.
we can help them out later.
Mr. Paul Boyer.
Well, I think first off, we need to support public safety, and I think local public safety. I fought for, and thankfully we got into the state budget this year, $3.3 million for DPS, the Department of Public Safety. I think we can't incentivize illegal behavior. By doing that, it not only encourages that kind of activity, but it's also a slap in the face to those who did come here illegally and those who did it the right way. Like my good friend Koos, who's from Holland, who spent around $10,000 of his own money, probably more than that, and spent a few years of his life just trying to make sure that he could do it the right way. I also think that we need to work with our congressional delegation, but ultimately it depends on an executive who's willing to enforce the borders. Now, if a fence doesn't work, as Charles Krauthammer said, well then why is there a fence around the White House? And really, and also it works in Israel. I've been to Israel, and they have fencing where they have a lot of chain link fencing, and they do have about 3% that's concrete with some of the more critical areas. And they brush through the rocks to make sure that there's been no activity, there's been no foot traffic there. And they follow up on it if there has been. The fencing has electronic sensors. There's ways that it can be done. It's just a matter of willpower, starting from the executive and on to the Congress to make it happen. And so I think that's why we have to work with our congressional delegation to make sure that that does happen.
Thank you very much. We begin this question with Mr. Seal. What is the single most pressing issue facing the state of Arizona, and how would you address it as a state legislator? Mr. Carl Seal.
If it's not clear, Obamacare. Obamacare, Obamacare, Obamacare. Obamacare will not only bankrupt us, but absolutely Obamacare. Not only how it was passed, the Supreme Court said that we had options as a state. We didn't have to do all the things. We didn't have to expand Obamacare. We did. We got it railroaded down our throat. It will bankrupt us. We absolutely have to, even though we're in the midst of that, I think our only hope at this moment is to reduce enough fraud, waste, and abuse in the state government to be solvent long enough for the U.S. Senate to turn over the U.S. Senate for people like Durbin, who's not running for re-election because he knows what a nightmare Obamacare is, and get a natural-born U.S. president Republican in the White House and undo Obamacare. That is our only hope right now. I have found and know conclusively that there's well over $1 billion of your dollars being fraudulently stolen from you because they're not using a thing called a computer to check the claims of Medicaid. They refuse even to answer calls about it. What I will insist upon this next year, and I think we're going to have a much better legislature and a new governor, and therefore I think we'll be able to effectively use technology, which we're a leader in here in Arizona, to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse and prevent groups like Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah from stealing your Medicaid dollars and funding their operations. We absolutely have to put a stop to that. Right the ship, undo Obamacare, keep fighting the good fight in the court that I'm a claimant on, or I'm a party to the suit, to stop Obamacare in Arizona. That is the single most important thing to do. If we do not do that, all the other things we're talking about here are really going to be moot because the state will be federalized into some state federal district, and they may not even recognize our state name anymore. That's what we absolutely have to stop it, and I know how to stop it, and I've been fighting the good fight to stop it.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mr. Thurane Unkin.
I'm in full agreement with Representative Seal about the Medicaid expansion, the problem with Obamacare, and the possibility of the federal government encroaching far beyond it ever has before to an alarming level. My emphasis, however, is simply with the 10th Amendment right that we as a state have to assert that's individual state sovereignty. I believe that individual rights and civil liberties lie at the core of what the founders wanted for all of their posterity. We're the posterity of the founders from the preamble of the Constitution. You know, to ourselves and our posterity do ordain and establish this Constitution. So, to emphasize why I believe that this is a very important part of ending Obamacare in Arizona and going to a free market system for health care that actually creates lower cost health care, perhaps strangely really rests with our 10th Amendment right as a state, in my mind. And that would be in fighting against any unlawful use by the federal government of the Patriot Act, any unlawful use of the federal government under the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. And third, we know about the NSA spying that's been going on with the federal government. These things would work, I would say, in conjunction with the health care, where they're going to now have all of our private information about our health. They've got our Social Security number, they've got information about us that I assume that as a state we now give them, when I say them, the federal government, to our personal data on all levels. It's very disconcerting to me. And I feel that as a state, it's one of the first things that we need to focus on is our 10th Amendment right to protect the individual rights and civil liberties of everyone under the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Unkin. Mr. Paul Boyer.
Thank you. I think our single most pressing issue facing the state of Arizona is our budget. I mentioned Proposition 105 is the part of the puzzle, or the piece of the puzzle to fix that. We currently have $450 million in our rainy day fund, and that's great. But what most people don't know is we have $1.2 billion in rollovers to education alone. Debt is our 7th highest budgetary unit that we have to spend money on every year. So what I would do to reform Proposition 105, first off, we'd have to refer it to the voters. So you'd be given the opportunity to decide, again, as our priorities change as a state, if you want to continue funding previous voter-protected spending measures that have already been passed by previous voters who may no longer live here. Now, Gallup did a survey saying that within 12 months, that 1 out of every 5 Arizonans will leave Arizona. You know, and Arizona really is a commuter state. We have a lot of growth here. And I think that we should give Arizonans, current Arizona voters and residents, the opportunity to determine what we should be spending our money on, what we should prioritize as a state. So as I'm knocking on doors and I'm talking to voters, I always bring this issue up, and I try and convince every single voter that I talk to that this is a very critical issue because we can only manage, again, 31% of our budget. It's also going to take earned media. It's going to take talking to media and convincing Channel 12, Channel 15, all the networks and print why it's so important that we should be able to have flexibility from the state level with our budget. I also think health reform is another pressing issue. I'm right now in contact with the health policy director in Indiana, looking at the good things they're doing there on health savings accounts and making our health care more consumer driven, giving us more freedom of choice in that respect. Those are 2 things I'll be focusing on.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Mr. Anthony Kern.
Wow, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. I'm honored to try to answer it. To narrow it down to one pressing issue in the state is a little hard to do because I will work hard to repeal Obamacare. I believe there are issues in our state budget, and I do believe our civil liberties are being taken away by excessive government. But I'll tell you, going back to the borders, border security equals national security. If we allow another 9/11 to happen, it doesn't matter about Obamacare. It won't matter about Common Core. It won't matter about our economy. We will have another travesty. And the only thing that really stopped our entire nation from collapsing on 9/11 was they were a little bit disorganized. If they had been timed to do what they really wanted to do, if it was timed correctly, I don't know if we'd be here today, to be honest with you. And that can happen again. These are not just little children crossing this border. These are people from other countries. These are people from the Middle East that are coming across this border that we do not know who they are. And you know, you and I both know we have a lot of enemies. I think one of the biggest issues that our nation has, and definitely our state has, and I'm not sure how to address it, is the uninformed voter. The uninformed voter sits back like a frog in a kettle and just takes for granted that what we have is what we have. We've got to get our message out. Our message as a conservative resonates with the population. Our country is going down the tubes, and Democrat, Republican agree with that. We need to do what we can to educate the public, get involved, do what you can do to help your candidate, vet the candidates, and elect the person that will try to turn this nation and this state around. Our borders need to be secured. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. We're going to begin the next question with Mr. Thurain Unkin. Please explain how you would retain the power of the legislature as a check towards the executive branch in Arizona.
To retain the power of the legislature as a check against the
executive branch,
the governor. Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting because the idea, as I understand it, from school and the education that I've had, is that the legislature and the judiciary and the governor's office are supposed to hold each other in check. We see this somewhat mirrored at the federal level, don't we? We have a president who says, I can use a pen and a phone to get what I want done. And I hate to criticize our leaders, but that's what being a patriot is, isn't it, in part? To be a true patriot is to criticize government. And that's part of the freedom of what we have as Americans. The legislature already has the authority to hold the governor's office in check. I think perhaps the problem is the legislature, and I say this not to criticize our two representatives here, perhaps hasn't been willing, would be, I think, a fair word, to hold the governor accountable. I'm certain that there's legislation that they could put in place to try to enforce the limitations that are supposed to be placed on the executive office and the governor. So I would say that would be a first step, would be legislation. And the boldness and bravery of the state legislature and the Senate to say, hey, you can't just do anything you want with a pen and a phone, as our president said that he could do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Unkin. Mr. Paul Boyer.
Well, the same principle applies as it does to Article 1 in the U.S. Constitution, and that's the power of the purse. We pass budgets, and hopefully you have a governor, and as you all know, we do have a governor's race this year. Hopefully we elect somebody in the 9th floor that you don't really have to keep in check. Hopefully that's somebody that can gel with the legislature. But if you have to, that's the #1 way that you can do that. And also on the state level, you can override the governor's vetoes. With enough votes in the legislature, in the House and the Senate, 40 in the House and 20 in the Senate, you can override a gubernatorial veto, or if you need to. And so those are two main ways where you can hold the governor in check.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Mr. Anthony Kern.
Yes, could you repeat that question, please?
Yes. Please explain how you would retain the power of the legislature as a check towards the executive branch in Arizona.
Thank you. Well, as you know, we have a governor's race going on right now, and I would ask that we, vet the governor's candidates, gubernatorial candidates, and pick the one that you think would work best with a Republican-led legislature. The power of the purse is very important. I think a lot of times we give away, the state legislature gives away a lot of their powers. And I think some of those need to be taken back. Take these State Board of Education, for instance, or take for instance, the 17th Amendment, where the state senators used to be appointed, the federal senators, McCain and Senator Flake, used to be appointed by the legislature. I think we need to, as a legislator, bring the power back to the legislatures, which they're the ones closest to the people. There is an appeal process. There is I'm not sure if appeal is the right word, but there is a recall process that we can use if the governor gets out of control. It was real sad to see what happened during the passage of the Medicaid expansion. When I watched the videos of State Representative Montenegro and the video of Representative Boyer and these representatives that worked hard to try to keep Medicaid expansion from coming into this state, which is to me a federal overreach into our state. And to have the governor do what she did really was disheartening, really was sad. You can't side with the enemy to try to pass something that is not the will of the people. And there's a lot of avenues we can take to work together, but in a utopian world, I would love to see the governor and the legislature worked hand in hand to get good bills passed, bring back and restore our civil liberties, reduce our taxes, bring in business, free market. Thank you.
Mr. Carl Seal.
One of the things I've done early on, I don't know if you recall when they did the quote-unquote Independent Redistricting Commission, otherwise known as Obama gerrymandering. Colleen Mathis, the chair of that Independent Redistricting Commission, held several non-public meetings in violation of the Open Meetings Law and hired a contractor that's, guess who? One of Obama's chief administrators and chief political strategists named Ken Strausma, who owned and operated the company that redrew the lines here in Arizona, and they had particular interest in my district because I held the president accountable on his legal documents of whether or not he was a natural-born U.S. president or not, or citizen. So they paid pretty close attention to my district. And gave us the new 20, and I'm thankful I got reelected here. So I voted and worked with the legislature to remove Colleen Mathis and impeach her. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court of Arizona reinstated her. More recently, I have stood fervently on the floor and called out the fouls of how this bill, the bill of Obamacare in Arizona, is patently unconstitutional on its face. Why? Because it must and it would require a tax increase and requires a supermajority vote of the legislature. I ran a floor amendment to make sure that Prop 108 would be properly reflected in there and that it would have a supermajority vote. And one of my own colleagues did a procedural move and prevented that motion from even being heard. That is just incredible to me. But I have stood the ground to make sure that the legislature holds government accountable. I have advocated the circulation of the referendum of that very item. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough signatures to do that. I supported and am a chief member of the lawsuit that the Goldwater Institute is fighting at this very day and will be decided the 26th of August whether or not it's going to go to the Arizona Supreme Court to undo Obamacare and show that it's unconstitutional because it's an unlawful tax increase without a supermajority vote of the legislature, and it's an unlawful delegation of legislative authority. Your legislature that you elect is the only body that can increase your taxes. But right now, the executive can increase your taxes without the consent of the legislature, and that's patently unacceptable.
We are going to begin the next question, Mr. Boyer. Article 2, Section 2 of the Arizona Constitution states that the purpose of government is to secure individual rights. What is the most egregious violation of this purpose that you see? Mr. Paul Boyer.
Well, the Arizona voters voted in 2010, I believe, for the freedom of health care. And that was universally rejected at the state legislature with what some of the panelists on here have been talking about with the Medicaid expansion. We have a right to determine our own health care future and our own needs and our own wants as far as health care is concerned. And so I think that, and I also am on the Goldwater lawsuit that is asking the courts to intervene because we believe that it's a tax increase and that Proposition 108, which says that you need a 2/3 majority to pass any tax increase, which they did not get, that we think that we have standing. Well, we believe we have standing, but we also think we have a solid case that says that we shouldn't have this expansion of Medicaid in Arizona. Even the Arizona Republic on June 17th of 2013 called the Medicaid expansion a linchpin of Obamacare. And so I believe that the will of the voters was thwarted in that respect. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, and I'm in the infant stages of looking at the policy implications and the details, but how we can have a more consumer-driven healthcare approach to the state of Arizona, where we can control, you as Arizonans can control your healthcare needs, what you would like to pay, and not a minimum benefit package that you don't even want because you don't need it. And so, to answer the question, I do believe that was a right that was taken away from Arizona voters, and I look at restoring that right in any way I can.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Mr. Anthony Kern.
Well, our civil rights, our individual rights are being trampled on by the government every day. Freedom of speech, freedom to open up a business of your choice. Our freedoms are being eroded, and little by little, we're turning our country around to a government-dependent type nation. It was another travesty to see this latest bill. I think it was SB 1060, not sure, but that was the bill where the business refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple, and it was against their religious beliefs. The whole issue of that bill, in my opinion, was the freedom of that business to be allowed to do what they want to do. And I applaud the recent Supreme Court ruling for Hobby Lobby. Thank God we got a good ruling out of the Supreme Court. I firmly believe that the more regulations we put on business, going back to that particular bill, the media turned that around to make it a gay lesbian issue. And they, in my opinion, the media blew that up completely out of proportion. There were a couple of states right after Arizona had that big fiasco that had passed similar type bills, and there was very little said. So our rights as individuals are being eroded by city governments, county governments, state governments, and federal governments, little by little. And we need to be on top of what's happening. In this particular bill, I would have definitely voted for that business. And I firmly believe that they had the right to do what they felt they should do. It's not discrimination, it is their right as a private business owner.
Thank you, Mr. Kern.
Thank you.
Mr. Carl Seal.
To further what I was talking about Obamacare and what a travesty it is an affront to liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness. The Obamacare here in Arizona, we have the freedom of choice for health care. I led the way in the legislature to have the voters make the choice for that and constantly articulated that and said that the voters of this state have said clearly that they want freedom of choice for health care. They don't want socialized medicine and controlled economies. They don't want that. I worked on bills, I drafted bills to give what's called freedom of choice or purchasing health insurance across state lines. There's this thing called the Republican platform, which if you have a chance to read it, I suggest you do, that suggests that what we should do is purchase health insurance from 4,500 companies instead of just 300 here in Arizona. Think what a better deal you'd get if you could buy from 4,500 companies. Different risk pools. You know, different states have much lower age than Arizona and Florida do, for example. You get a better deal in another state. It's called the free market. Then we do another thing that I co-sponsored called tort reform. So we reduce the cost of caring for people and let doctors care for their patients instead of insurance companies and lawyers. Those are the things we should do. Those are the things that will work. And those are the things that I've proffered. Thank God this last year it got on the floor and the Republicans in the room voted for it. So I hope to do that next year, particularly we undo Obamacare, go to a free market model, purchase health insurance across state lines, affirm what people want, freedom of choice for health care. That's what we should do. That's what I've done. And I think we can do it next year with a different governor.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Therain Onkin.
There's no question that the Medicaid expansion and Obamacare issue is a threat to our individual rights, and that is what that part of the Arizona Constitution is there for, is to assert. And thank God that those authors of that were clear on that and aligned with our founders in the Constitution that the protection of individual rights and civil liberties is at the core of what makes everything else work. We have several areas that we are constantly being attacked, and we may not feel it now, but eventually we're going to feel it. And that's, as I stated earlier, with even the Patriot Act, which is supposed to protect us, but is also serving to enable the federal government, and as a state we tend to just sort of let them do it, to come in and do whatever they want in the name of protecting us. The NSA spying, which is supposed to be a way to find bad guys, you know, the advance of the Common Core, because some of the educators say, well, we need more money. We could find ways to get money within the budget that we already have. It's 41% of the state budget is education. I think the Common Core stands against our rights, rights in education to choose, rights in health to choose. The National Defense Authorization Act is another anathema to liberty in my mind. And drone use I'd like to mention as well, the use of drones. All of these things stand against our state constitution, which says, let's protect individual rights under the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Onken. For our last question, we are going to begin with Mr. Anthony Kern. Why should we elect you to this office?
It's a great question, thank you. I am a principled, honest, conservative Republican. I'm a Christian. I believe in our country, I believe in our nation. I believe in our state. I believe in our city. I believe in the people. I love people, and I love talking to people. I love hearing their needs, and as my wife knows, I will do all I can to meet people's needs. It's an old saying, a friend in need is a friend of mine. I was asked back in February 2013 to run in this race when there was an open seat. I was at a Lincoln Day luncheon, and I was approached by our LD chairman, and he had asked if I was interested in running for an open seat. As you know, you get 2 votes for the Arizona House. I conferred with my wife, and I said, what do you think? And she said, yeah, you know, we agreed to do it. So about 8 months later, that open seat became unopened, and I found myself campaigning. I had already made commitments, and I found myself campaigning for Arizona House with Representative Paul Boyer, who I'm honored to run with. I think that there should be a change at the Arizona House. I appreciate the hard work that our legislators have done, but at this point, I do think there should be a change at the Arizona House in the sense that it is one thing to, you know, be a conservative. It's a great thing to be a conservative. But just to be a conservative, you need to, as a legislator, you need to get bills passed, and you need to get bills moved forward, and good bills that help the people. And I don't see that being done right now, and I am honored, and again, I appreciate all the hard work that our legislators have done, and I am honored to be a part of this campaign with Paul Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Mr. Carl Seal.
Well, here you go. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought about running for the Corporation Commission. I explored it. In the process of doing that, I realized Obamacare was coming around the corner, and I encouraged the leaders in the party to look for a good candidate to fill the seat that I would be leaving. I spoke to Mr. Kern about that very same idea early on because I wanted to be sure, because there were some Republicans I knew early on that were a little bit on the squishy side and needed some calcium pills and a backbone. And I figured that we need to make sure that we fill the legislature with good, solid, conservative, rock-rib, platform, Reagan Republicans. I did that, ladies and gentlemen, and I haven't talked about it publicly until right now. But I want you to know that I did that. People do criticize me for not passing bills. Most of my bills, ladies and gentlemen, significantly reduce the size of government and cut taxes and get the government out of your way and give you more of your liberty back. Most of government doesn't like that. They don't want you to know how many dead people are on Access right now. They don't want you to know how much money Al-Qaeda is stealing from you. They don't want you to know how Medicaid is going to ration health care and tax you to oblivion and triple your Medicaid, your insurance rates. They don't want you to know that. I have consistently called them out on that, and I will consistently do that in the future. I'd very much appreciate your support because I have had 2 bills get to the governor's desk, by the way. One of them was the notes bill, which she signed, which kept the state of Arizona solvent. If you're a teacher or you depend on a state check, it didn't bounce in this state. Why? Because of the notes bill. California it bounced, Nevada it bounced, but not here, because of the notes bill. At the same time, she had the birther bill on her desk. She vetoed that. She said it was a bridge too far to require the chief election officer to hold every candidate accountable for qualifying. Even to this day, ladies and gentlemen, if she only signed one of my bills, I'd rather her sign the notes bill than the birther bill, and twice on Sunday. Why? Because it keeps the state of Arizona solvent. So those may criticize me and say I haven't passed a lot of bills, but those bills that I've had are very impactful.
Mr. Thorane on Kin.
Well, Representative Seal, you've got my vote. We are running together as well. But I believe that you should elect me, and here's why. We need an increase of liberty, and we need a reduction in tyranny, and we're seeing tyranny expand. I think that the 3 key areas right now that we need to increase liberty and decrease tyranny would be, 1, our state's right under the 10th Amendment. Number 2, we need to create an opportunity and an environment by getting out of the way, perhaps ironically, by bringing government out of the way of the free market and allowing it to do what it's supposed to do, which is provide goods and services at affordable costs, so that when you drive by the corner, and I'll bet you there's corners right around here. In fact, I know that there are corners around here because I've been going out and doing my signs by myself, where there are empty, no businesses. There were small businesses thriving right around here, weren't there? We all saw them. Where are they? They're gone. Because we had a fake economy a few years ago that gave a great boost, and they were rolling along, and then they all went out of business, so they're gone. We've got to, I would say, decrease corporate taxes by 25% and decrease government to a corresponding amount, bureaucracy. So eliminate 25% bureaucracy and reduce the corporate taxes by 25%. To encourage free markets so that small businesses can come in again. They represent 35% of the jobs in Arizona, small businesses. You've got to have a free market. And third, we're going to have to repeal the Medicaid expansion and go with Representative Steele's platform solution, the Republican platform solution. I think it is the best solution. Free market. Increase liberty, decrease tyranny. That's why you should vote for me.
Thank you, Mr. McKinn. Mr. Paul Boyer.
Thank you. Great question. I think the reason why you should send me back to the state legislature is 2 primary reasons. My experience and also my proven conservative track record. 92% of all state spending is 3 buckets: public safety, education, healthcare. I've worked in 2 out of 3. I was the legislative liaison for the Arizona Department of Corrections for 3 years. I've worked for the largest school district in the state. I'm also a professor right now and also a teacher, and so I'm very familiar with education issues. And I also serve as vice chair on the health committee. And so you need somebody in there with experience who understands the issues, who can constrain state spending while still providing for core necessary government services that I think we all can agree upon, public safety being, in my mind, number 1. I've received, as I mentioned earlier, the Hero of the Taxpayer Award. I was a spokesman and a policy advisor for House Majority. It's great to have folks up here who claim to be conservative, but it's also, I think, just as important to have someone who can communicate and work with the media conservative Reagan Republican principles. I think that we all can agree upon and that we all should be rallying behind. I've been endorsed by Congressman Trent Franks, Congressman David Schweikert, Arizona Right to Life, and the National Federation of Independent Businesses. I invite you to learn more. Go to my website. That's my last name, BoyerAZ.com. That's B as in boy, OYERAZ.com. Drop me a line, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. We've run out of time for questions, and we'll now move on to closing statements. The first closing statement will be given by Mr. Carl Seal. Mr. Carl Seal.
I hope you've seen a lot this evening. I hope that you've seen a good cross-section. I hope those of you, if there's any of you in the room, although looking at it maybe not undecided, but if there was anyone in the room undecided, I hope after tonight you are decided. And I hope the decision is to not only vote for myself, but Mr. Thorane on Keene as well. Why? Because we support the Constitution. We will stand and defend the Constitution and will make government accountable. I've done that consistently. I could tell you about a ringing set of endorsements, which I've talked about, groups that Mr. Boyer and others have talked about, from Arizona Right to Life, the NRA, the NFIB, the Americans for Prosperity, which have recently named me a champion of the taxpayer for this last year's record. I would urge you to look at last year's record as well for all the candidates that might have a voting record, not just the year before, but last year's record as well. But that's all well and fine. That will show you that I actually do what I say I'm going to do, and that's important. But why don't we look at what people in the know think? Do you think that maybe precinct committeemen that watch us day in and day out and see us month after month, hold us accountable, know what's going on and know the truth from maybe less than, or maybe they have a pretty good idea? A set of voters in the know, do you think that they probably would? I think so. In fact, the straw poll and the poll, the official poll that we did last night in District 20, shows that I have 30% of the vote. Mr. Onkeen has 25.3% of the vote. Mr. Kern has 22%. Mr. Boyer has 20%. And Mr. Adams, not here tonight, had 2%. So if you get to elect two of us, and the most knowledgeable voters are precinct committeemen, and they saw fit to elect Lorraine and I hope that you'll do the same. My name's State Representative Carl Seal, and I'd be honored to serve you for another 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mr. Anthony Kern.
Thank you. You have some good choices as a voter in the Legislative District 20. I hope to earn your vote. I appreciate the comment by Representative Seal about he wanted to put in a Reagan conservative, one with backbone, into this seat, and he chose me. I am honored to run with Representative Paul Boyer. That was also at the behest of Mr. Carl Seal. And for what our liberties are being taken away. Our nation is going down. Many, many people out there don't know what to do about it. My advice would be to vet candidates, vet them strongly, see what they've done, see what they're not doing. I will be a candidate that will work for the people. A lot of candidates get in office and it's all about them. It's no longer about who do we serve. Servant leadership. Servant leadership is I, as a representative, serve you as the people in a leadership position. But you are my boss. And if you don't like the way I'm doing my job, then you can fire me through a recall process or through getting the vote out, or getting the word out and not voting me in the second time. I will work hard. I know what I'm going up against, and it's going to be a tough fight. I know what I believe. I believe in our state. I believe in our city. I believe in our nation. I believe what men and women have died for. I know what we have. I've listened to stories from people from other countries. My wife came from Honduras, and she became a United States citizen about 3 years ago. She is honored to be here tonight. I've heard the stories of nations that don't have what we have. It is imperative that we elect representatives that do not just stand up and talk and tell you what you want to hear during an election season and then turn around and not do what they promised they would do. I will not be that candidate. I am proud to be a conservative Republican. I recently graduated from the police academy. I support public safety. I support protecting the people, and that is what I believe the role of our legislature should be, and the role of government should be to protect the people. I will work to repeal Medicaid. I will work to repeal Common Core, and I promise you I will work as your legislator. I will build relationships. I will learn a lot, but the most important thing is I will represent you, the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Mr. Paul Boyer.
Thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. It says a lot about you that you're here tonight or that you're watching online. You know, a lot of people don't even know who their state legislator is, maybe even just the name itself. So I think it's a credit to you that you're even here. I think you should send me back to the state legislature because I know how to grow an economy. I know that it takes equitable and broad-based tax policies. It takes predictable regulations. It also takes a permitting process where a business can get a permit and not an egregious amount of time. That it takes, in some cases, less than a week. Texas has a good system where they can do it in a day, the very same day. I know what it's like to grow an economy. I'm happy to report that Phoenix is beating job growth expectations nationally. We're on the top 10 list. We're number 6. The reason why that's important is 70% of our state's GDP is concentrated in the Phoenix metro area. I think you should also send me back to the state capitol, because I have some great policy ideas that I'm not ready to let go just yet. We have a serious problem in Arizona, and that's with internet crimes against children. It's an area that I'm fully committed to fighting. We have right now, and I hate to report this, but right now we have 15,000 leads of computers that are trading child pornography. The U.S. Marshal's Office, the FBI says that 50 to 70% of people who are trading child porn are hands-on offenders. They're hurting victims as young as infants. And so I'm working on a bill right now. I'm working with stakeholders to talk to everybody who is interested, anybody who will talk to me about this, about hiring more full-time investigators to go after these perpetrators. We only have 4 full-time investigators for the entire state of Arizona. That's it. That's unconscionable to me. We need to fix that. We needed to fix that years ago. And so I'm fully committed to that. I'm fully committed to healthcare reform through HSAs, health savings accounts, through a high-risk pool, consumer-driven healthcare, making sure that no physician should have to either acquire or retain their license by having to accept Medicare and Medicaid patients if they don't want to. No doctor should be forced to accept Medicare and Medicaid patients if they don't want to. They should have the freedom to choose who they see. And I'll be running the bill that looks into that. And also, I've been working with the minority leader in the state of Illinois on auditing our state's Medicaid program, Access. They've had some great successes there, and I'd like to apply some of the same models here. I'm running as a conservative team with Anthony Kern, and so I invite you to look at his website. That's votekern.com. That's K-E-R-N, votekern.com. My website, boyeraz.com. Stick around. I'd love to visit with you. And if you don't have the time or availability, please visit my website if you're watching online, and talk to me there. Thank you.
Mr. Thurain on Keene.
You know, it's interesting when you have a situation like this where everyone seems very conservative and everyone seems very focused on what's important to us as conservatives. I'm certainly fiscally conservative. I do tend to lean a little bit more libertarian. I believe in liberty very strongly, and maybe we could call Representative Boyer and Anthony Kern's team the team conservative, and perhaps our team of Representative Seal and me as the Team Liberty. We're the Liberty team. It's just, in my mind, at this time in American history and Arizona history, as we're part of the United States, that we focus on the Constitution, the vision of the original founders of our country, and we get back to that. Kind of do a reset, if you will. Reduce government. Have as little as possible. I'd love to see the state income tax completely eliminated. I think there's a way we can do this. One of the ways would be to reduce government that much more. How exciting would that be? And you could say, well, that's a conservative thing, but I think it's even deeper than that. It's a liberty thing. Each of us has the right, because of the vision of the founders. In fact, let me take that back. Each of us has a right because we exist, because we're born to have rights, individual rights, to have liberty. We're just born with it. The Declaration of Independence asserted this fact to a tyrannical king, and then the Constitution sought to protect our individual rights and civil liberties. I think that's really what's the most important thing of all. Our right to exist, to be free, to think and do what we choose without hurting or damaging the liberty of others. This is fundamental. It's fundamental. It's at the core. because then we can worship and have free markets and have small businesses grow and expand and provide goods and services. Isn't that an exciting thing? They did that with those 13 colonies. They did that free from the central bank of England at that time, and with no central bank here, with the colonial monies that they created. And they had a really amazing economy, and then the British came in and kind of ruined it, and then they had to fight them off. And here we are again, seeing our liberties challenged. I would encourage you, regardless of who you vote for, because everyone here is clearly qualified, intelligent, smart people here, smarter than me as well, I would say, but I would certainly agree with Anthony Kernan that servant leadership is key. I believe we do need servant leaders who want to serve the cause of liberty and protect your and my individual rights. That's who I think we should vote for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Our candidates, we thank you so much for participating in the forum this evening, and to the audience. We thank all of you who took the time to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to find out more about clean elections and the candidates running for office by visiting www.azcleanelections.gov. A video of this forum, as well as other clean elections forums, will be posted on the site within 72 hours of a scheduled forum. Thank you all for coming tonight.